Hello, I'm Matt from Practical BI, and today we're going to be looking at conditional formatting in Power BI. This is a beginner level video. You don't need much experience in Power BI to be able to follow this, and the only prerequisite is that you have a basic understanding of how to bring data and visuals into Power BI. Don't need much more background than that. Okay, well, what is conditional formatting? Well, across a range of different tools, conditional formatting simply means changing the format according to a value within your data. In a Power BI context and within the context of what we're going to talk about today, we're specifically looking at changing the color of your visuals depending on the value of the data that is displayed within them. So, for example, very simple example, we might want to say a value above 0 is colored green, a value below 0 is colored red. A very common and simple example of using conditional formatting. So let's jump straight into it. Okay, so we're in a dashboard here that I've set up. Don't worry about all of the tables that we've got. We're going to work through each of these and apply a different type of conditional formatting to each, just as an example for how each type of conditional formatting works within Power BI. So let's start at the beginning. This first table here, across all of the data, we've got two columns. We've got a country, and then we've got units sold here as well. Just assume this to be the number of units of a particular product sold across each country. So there are a few different ways that we can apply conditional formatting. And let's just dive straight into how we do that. So first of all, I'm going to go to the Format tab with my table selected, and I'm going to go down to the conditional formatting option here. When I expand that out, you'll see that I've got my country field selected, and I can drop down there and choose either of my fields here to apply conditional formatting to. I'm going to leave it as country selected for now. You can see then I've got four options here, four toggles. I can apply conditional formatting to the background color of the cells or the font color. I can add icons, and I can format the cell as a web URL. And we'll talk about each of these individually. Notice though that if I change the field here and I go to units sold, I have an additional option here called data bars. So this again, we'll talk through this one. But the reason that this option is here for my unit sold column and not for my country column is because data bars rely on a numeric value to format, and they can only apply to the cell that numeric value is contained within, if we're talking about tables. So let's start by looking at font color here. So I'm just going to toggle my font color on, again with my units sold field selected. You'll notice that straight away Power BI has applied some formatting there. We've got higher values colored in green and lower values colored in red. Let's have a look at the advanced controls. You see a little hyperlink here, and that will let me change some of the options about the conditional formatting that's been selected. Okay. So first of all, let's just have a look at the top left-hand corner here. We've got a format by option, and we've got color scale selected. Now there are three options under this drop-down. I've got color scale, rules, and field value. And we'll talk through each of these, but let's stick with color scale for now. What this represents, as the title suggests, is a color that represents the lowest possible value in my selection, and a color that represents the highest possible value in my selection. So these are automatically derived at the moment. So you can see we've got lowest value and highest value here. If I drop down on them, I could input a custom value if I wanted to say that my lowest value is fixed, and same for my maximum and my highest value there. I could drop down in custom and add a value if I want to fix that maximum. Let's leave them as dynamic for now based on the selection. Let's have a look at some of the other options at the top. So we've got apply to. So this is where we're applying the conditional formatting, and it's simply the option for, do we want to include the totals in our conditional formatting? Do we want to just apply to the totals, or do we just want to apply to the values? So for now, I'm just going to keep that as values only. And next, I'm going to go down to my based on field here. So you can see that at the moment I'm based on a sum of units sold. So that is the field that makes up and the aggregation that makes up the values that we have in this column here. And I could change that to another field if I wanted. So it could be that I want to format the country field, but format it based on sum of units sold. And so you can choose a measure or a column to inform and to determine the conditional formatting on that particular cell, or that particular field even. So next I've got my summarization option. So this is how I'm going to aggregate my data. At the moment I'm looking at a sum, as we've seen. I could look at averages, maximum, minimum, etc. To inform my formatting. And then I have one more option here, which is effectively how I'm going to treat my blanks in my data. So I can just format them as 0, I can not format them at all, or I can choose a specific color for those blanks. So I'm just going to leave this as is. One more option just to mention is that we've got a diverging tick box here, and what this does is it inserts a third option in the middle of our range. So on this kind of scale, we're talking red, amber, green, or red, yellow, green. But it may be that we want to highlight a divergence from the midpoint of the values in our table, in which case I could choose the same color either side, and the color will simply represent the movement or the distance from the center point of our values in our selection. So I'm going to remove that diverging option, stick with a red to green, and I'm just going to OK that again. Okay, so that's the color scale option, and depending on how many values you have in your table, it may, or whatever other visual you're using, it may be easier or harder to determine the difference between the colors. In this instance, you might be able to see that we've got two red values, two very distinctly green values, and then we've got a darker looking green value here for the USA, which has a lower number of units sold, but is still closer to the green. So you can determine that, but it might not be the best approach when you haven't got many values available in your table. So the next option, if we look at this second table here, we're going to look at the rules format by option for conditional formatting. So again, I'm going to go into my Format tab, I'm going to go to Conditional Formatting, I'm going to select my Units Sold field, and I'm going to turn on Background Color Conditional Formatting. And you see again straight away we've got an automatic an automatic conditional formatting applied here by Power BI, red and green again. But let's just have a look at the advanced controls and see what's going on. So we can see here that yet again we've got the color scale format by option selected. So I'm going to drop down on that and I'm going to change it to rules. And what the rules option does is it allows me to determine my own rules, again as the name suggests, for what determines the color of each cell. So I can, the first rule I have here is if the value is greater than or equal to 0% of my maximum and is less than 0, the number, then red. So let's work through each of these options as we go through. And let's just apply a rule that says if my value is above 220,000, then we'll color that green. If it's below 220,000, we'll color it red. So I'll say if my value is greater than or equal to 220,000, and I want that to be a number as opposed to a percent, and is less than my maximum, which is 100%, then green. I'm going to use my new rule button up here to add another rule. I'm going to say if my value is greater than or equal to 0%, so the minimum value, or 0% of my maximum, I should say, and is less than the number 220,000, then red. The other options that I have available here are exactly the same as we've seen before. We've got an apply to. Do we want to look at the values or the totals or both? The field that we want to base the conditional formatting on, and the method of aggregation as well. So let's OK that. And as you can see, we've got very distinct colours: red for below 220,000, green for above. So whether we're formatting the background color or the font color, our options are exactly the same. It just changes how the formatting comes across there. So let's have another look at our background color. This time we're going to look at the third option in format by. We're going to look at formatting by field value. So again, I'm going to turn on my background color here. I'm going to go to advanced controls, and this time I'm going to drop down. I'm going to look at field value. Now the way that field value works is it determines the color of your cells by the output of a column or a measure. So if I drop down here, what's missing is any kind of column or measure that provides me with a color value as an output. And that's what we need for field value to work. So at the moment, I can't use any of these fields. For example, if I try to use country and I just click OK there, we'll notice that we've got an error coming up at the top, and it says we found a value we don't recognize for background color. And that's because the value that needs to be interpreted needs to represent a color. And you can use RGB values, hex values, you can type in simple color names. There's a whole range of options for how you specify a color. But let's go ahead and create a measure that's going to give us a simple color output. So I'm just going to click New Measure at the top here. I'm going to call this measure background color. And I'm just going to use a simple if statement and say if my sum of units sold is greater than 220,000, then green, else red. Just specifying them as texts, green and red. Let's OK that. And this time when I go back into my advanced controls for my background color conditional formatting, I can change my based on field to be background color. I can OK that. And you'll notice that I've got green values for above 220,000 and red values for below. So if I wanted to change the colors that are used here, I can simply just change how I specify my colors. I could specify a hex value here. I could specify an RGB value. As I've said, there are a number of ways of expressing the colors that you want to use there. So that's the field value option. And that covers the formatting that we can do to the background color and to the font color. Let's have a look now at the icons formatting. So on this table here, I'm going to this time, instead of going to my Format tab, I'll show you another way of adding conditional formatting. We can drop down on the field that we want to apply the conditional formatting to here. I can go to my conditional formatting option, and I can go to icons. It works in exactly the same way, just a different way of navigating to the same point. So again, you'll see I've got a format by option, and I can choose either rules or a field value to give me my output. I'm going to stick with rules. Other options similar to what we've seen before, but this time I've got options across icon layout, icon alignment, and style. I'm going to leave all of these as they are for now, just to show you the kind of thing that comes up when we apply these. So let's click OK to that. And you can see that we've got a green circle icon next to the higher values and a red diamond next to the lower values. Let's have a look at what's going on there and why we're getting those values. So this time I'm going to go into my conditional formatting tab here. I'm going to go onto units sold, down to icons, have a look at my advanced controls again. Okay, so what are our options here? Well, let's look at rules first of all. So we've got 3 rules selected, and they're based on the percentage value of the maximum that each individual cell represents. So we're saying if we're in the bottom third, between 0 and 33%, then give me a red icon. If we're in the middle third, between 33 and 67%, give me an orange triangle. And if we're in the top third, between 67 and 100% of the maximum, then give me a green circle. So we could add more rules to this. We could take rules away. It works in exactly the same way as before. Our other options are to change the style of icon. So I could use arrows or flags instead of my triangles and shapes. I can change the alignment. I can change the position, the vertical alignment of the icon within the cell. and I can change whether the icon appears to the left of the data, whether only the icon appears and I don't see any data, or whether the icon appears to the right of the data. So let's leave this just as an icon only for now, and I'll click OK to that. Okay, so you can see I've just got a red or green flag for whether or not I am over my, which third, sorry, I am of my maximum field value each row sits within. So that's the icon option. Let's go across to data bars now. So again, it's starting with exactly the same data. I'm going to drop down on my format tab here, go to conditional formatting. I'm going to have a look at the units sold field, and I'm going to expand out, I'm going to turn on, sorry, my data bars option here. You can see that straight away I've got bars that are applied to my fields, working in exactly the same way as a column chart, a horizontal column chart. And each bar represents the value of the cell within that it sits within. So let's have a look at my controls again, my options, advanced controls here for data bars. And you see a slightly different view this time. So I have the option to just show the bar and hide the data. I have the option to apply a custom value for my minimum and maximum, or I can just use the minimum and maximum of the selection. I have the option to change the color of a positive and negative bar. I can choose the direction, whether I want the bar to move from left to right or right to left, and I can change the color of my axis there as well. Let's leave that as is for now. And that's the data bars option. So quite a simple but effective way of drawing attention to the values that you have in the table there. Now, before we move on to web URLs, I just want to demonstrate the dynamic element of conditional formatting that we've seen so far. You'll notice that all of the conditional formatting that we've applied is based on the maximum and minimum of the highest value, sorry, in our range, with the exception of where we've specified a set rule to look at the maximum or minimum. So in our background color, we're always saying anything below 220,000 is red, and anything above 220,000 is green. And same again when we look at field value. Anything above 220,000 is green, anything below is red. So let's see what happens when we change our selection in our dashboard. I've got some filters on this page. I'm going to drop down and just select two of my countries. I'm going to select Canada and France. Just before I do that, just notice that Canada and France are green when it comes to font using the color scale, and they're green across the board no matter the rule that I use here. So let's select Canada and France. Okay, what we notice is for our conditional formatting that is based on a set value of 220,000. We've still got Canada and France appearing as green because they still meet that condition. But if we look at our font color, where we're using a color scale, because France is now the minimum value in the selection, France is red. Canada stays as the maximum value, so that's green. And similarly, with our icons, we've got France now representing the minimum value and being red because it appears in that bottom third, and Canada remains in the top third, so is green. So that's what we mean when we say that the conditional formatting is dynamic. Let's remove that selection. Okay, so the final option within conditional formatting is this web URL option. So let's have a look at this table here. The difference with this table is I've got an additional column here that represents a web address. So I've got Wikipedia pages, just as an example, Wikipedia pages for each country that we've got here. Now what we can do is I can go into my Format tab, back to conditional formatting again, and I'm going to apply I'm going to tell Power BI to treat this URL as a URL to allow my user to click the link and direct to that respective web page. So I'm going to go to my country info field. I'm going to turn on web URL, and I get my options popping up straight away. I'm formatting by field value. That's my only option here, and I'm going to just I have to aggregate the field in some way, so I'm just going to take the first country info value, first value of the country info field. So let's just click OK to that. You'll see, just to indicate these hyperlinks here, we've got each of these underlined. I could click on any of these and it would take me direct to the Wikipedia page. But that doesn't look as clean as it could do. So let's try taking away the country info field. Keep my table as simple as possible. And I go back to my Format tab, Conditional Formatting, but this time I'm going to use the web URL. Excuse me. I'm going to use the web URL value on the country field. So instead of basing this on country, I'm going to base it on country info. I'm going to click OK to that. And you'll notice that now my hyperlinks appear against the country's name, but I'm still directing to the respective website for that country. So it just looks a bit cleaner and allows the user to click on the country names there for more information. Okay, and that's the web URL conditional formatting. So the final thing that I wanted to demonstrate here is just that conditional formatting can apply across many visualizations within Power BI and isn't restricted to tables. So let's have a look at how it can work in another visualization. I've got background color that we're going to look at formatting for my for a chart here that I've got, simple bar chart. I'm just going to go into my format options here. You'll notice that this time I don't have a conditional formatting option. So this time it's a different way of applying conditional formatting. I can go to the area that I want to format. So let's look at formatting the background of the chart. And you'll notice that next to the color box here, I have this FX icon. If I click on that, I bring up exactly the same conditional formatting options that we're familiar with from the table. I can format by a color scale, but this time I do have to specify the minimum and maximum as a custom value, purely because I'm looking at the overall background for the chart, and therefore it can't be dynamic. It's always got to be a fixed maximum and minimum. There's no variety of options. There's a single background. So let's just apply an arbitrary minimum background, minimum and maximum. Click OK to that, and you'll see that the background of the chart has been formatted as well. So there are a few different areas of visuals, and it depends on the visual that you've got as to how you can conditionally format that visual. But I could also look at data colors here. Again, you can see I've got the same icon. If I wanted to format my bars according to their value, I could do that as well. Apply a color scale here again, and click OK. You'll see that my green bars have gone green and disappeared, and my red bars, my lower values are red. And that is conditional formatting. I hope you've found this video helpful. If you have, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or thoughts, comments, concerns, please do add them to the comments underneath this video, and please do provide as much feedback as you can. Again, this is an early video, so happy to adapt these as would help for you. Thanks very much.